Hello. This recording is to help our university supervisors of student teachers here at Western Kentucky University. If you're brand new to this role, we welcome you. If you are a veteran student teaching supervisor who's done this for a while, a lot of this will be a review for you. However, if you did not supervise a student teacher in fall of 2023, there are several new templates that will look different to you. So it would be a good idea to review the entire training if you've not attended one of our trainings each semester. And our agenda during this recording will be to review the evaluation tools that we ask you as a supervisor to use along with the mentor teacher that will be helping you score our student teachers. We also will review the importance of the sources of evidence Google site that your student teacher will be collecting for you to review at each of the observations that you do. We have an overview of just the major responsibilities of your supervisory role during the semester. And then we will also have some specific information and some tutorials offered for you on how to score the student teacher at the final evaluation or the midterm, and how to use our anthology program. That's the program the computer program that we use online to enter the data for each of our student teachers, and we have tutorials available. Two of the main resources that will help you throughout the semester is our student teacher handbook website. There are 3 separate pages to that website that are, there's lots of pages, but 3 that are going to be most important to you is the University Supervisor page, the University Supervisor Timeline page, and the evaluation page. And that student teaching handbook site looks like this. It has, many pages. So when you open it, you'll see either over to the right, or if you're opening it on a phone, it might be on your left. But the menu goes down. We have lots of different pages for our student teachers. Our student teachers have to review the entire student teaching website. We only ask our university supervisors to really focus on the pages that are geared for them. So that university supervisor page, as you will see here, has the recording from today and a recording from past trainings. Our anthology tutorials are there that you can watch and kind of go through. It gives you some overall information. It outlines the evaluation tools, even though they're also on the evaluation page. It outlines all the sources of evidence that we're going to talk about in a few minutes, with all the templates that our student teachers have, again, on another page. So, and then about the midterm and final evaluations. And then our anthology tutorials, again, are down here. That's our anthology program that we'll talk about in a minute. We also have some travel voucher information and things like that. So this Google or website, this student teaching handbook site, is going to be really important that you bookmark it somewhere that you can refer back to it. Again, we have that university supervisor page, the timeline for supervisors. So it gives you a little more breakdown about the first couple of weeks, the first 4 weeks, the first 8 weeks, and so on. So that's the timeline page. And then the last one that I think is probably most important for you as a supervisor is the evaluation. So the evaluation page has all of the templates and the different things that you'll be using to evaluate your student teacher. Each of these documents in this web page will be things that are Google forms or Google documents that you will open up, and it'll force you to make a copy. So when you open it, it'll ask you to make a copy so that then you can use that individual page with your student teacher. And this actually is the formal observation evaluation document that we use. So this is a hard copy of it. You can either use this, or take notes and use this when you put it in anthology, however you decide to do that. Our anthology program that we'll talk more about in a minute, but I'll just show you We do have tutorials, and everything will be entered into into Anthology. So we will talk a little bit more about that in the recording here in just a few minutes. So that university webpage, those 3 pages on the website are going to be really important for you. The other thing is we've sent you a resource page along with this recording, or where you found this recording for today's training also had this resource page, and that looks like this. So throughout this training, you'll see these different links, and they're all hyperlinked to things. It's just like a checklist of the things we're talking about in this recording. And every time you see one of these little checklist icons on one of the slides during this recording, it means something is on this university page. So it's something's been put on that. So those are the documents I think that are going to be most helpful to you as you move forward throughout the semester. So the most important evaluation tools that you're using are the Kentucky Framework for Teaching. Kentucky did adopt the Danielson Framework. It has 4 domains. If you've become a supervisor for us, it means you're either a retired educator, a current educator in an administrative role. It means that you, hopefully, in Kentucky, you have become aware of the Kentucky Framework. If not, we need you to study it again. If it's been a while since you've looked at it, we need you to look over the Kentucky Framework and really become ready to use that to evaluate the student teacher. All of our evidence needs to come from the Danielson's Framework. Just like in our public schools here in Kentucky, that's how our students, that's how our teachers are being in the public schools being observed and evaluated. So our students have had that framework in their clinical semesters. They should be very familiar with it. We've also gone over it at our student teaching training. So it should not be new to anyone, even if they look at you and tell you that. But our instructors are using it in the clinicals. So that is the document that we will use every time you observe your student teacher. In addition to that, when you get to the midterm, the first 8 weeks, or the final at the end of the 8 weeks, and then a final at the end of the second 8 weeks if you have 2 student teaching placements. If they have one student teaching, one 16-week, they're with one mentor teacher the whole time, then they get a midterm and a final. At that midterm and final time, at the first 8 weeks and end of the second 8 weeks, we do ask you to use a disposition rubric that we'll look at in the recording here in a few minutes. That rubric is really important because it is focused on the 10 dispositional areas that are not necessarily, they're definitely tied to the framework, but it is a separate document that we use at the time of the midterm and the final. And then there is a scoring guide that you'll look at when you assign a grade along with the mentor teacher. You and the mentor teacher will do that together. You'll look at the scoring guide where you'll look at how the student teacher is overall in the Kentucky Framework for Teaching at the time of the evaluation, how they progressed, and then you'll look at their disposition ratings. So the scoring guide gives you a guide how to get a grade of A, B, C, D, or F. And again, these are linked in our student teaching handbook site, as well as on that resource page. You'll see this icon here. It means these things are linked on that resource page for you today. So I mentioned the disposition rubric has 10 areas to be scored, which we'll look at, but it is a separate document when we go into Anthology. It'll make more sense when you see the Anthology program, but it's not tied to the final evaluation in Anthology. It's not one document. They are tied in the scoring. They're together. They need to go together when you and the mentor teacher decide on a grade, but they're 2 separate documents in Anthology. So that kind of sometimes it can be confusing. This is the scoring guide that I mentioned. So a student teacher will be rated on how well they're doing on the framework for teaching. which they can be developing on the framework, because the Danielson framework, even a veteran teacher could be developing and still be progressing. But the dispositions, we do want them accomplished at a grade of A, because dispositions are something that are going to be hard to change. They either are working to that accomplished level in those dispositional areas, or they're not. They can still get a B with an emerging disposition or above on all the ratings. But you can see this is how we use our scoring guide to come up with the final grade or the midterm grade. So our student teachers have to each create a sources of evidence Google site. So they have each already created this Google site as far as the template. We have templates for each of the documents of the evidence that goes into this site. We have templates for them on the website. They're also on your website, your web page for the university. You can see those for the university supervisor. The important part about this Google site is if you are observing them in the classroom, in order to score Danielson Kentucky Framework domains 1 and 4, you have to look at their lesson plan for that day. You have to look at how well they reflect and analyze the data after the observation is completed. You have to look at the profession. Domain 4 is all about professionalism and about professional growth plans, and how well they communicate with parents, and how well they understand their students, and all of those things come through domains 1 and 4. Those aren't things you're actually going to see when you go observe, when you watch them teach, but you'll see it in their Google site. You'll observe that Google site each time to see if it's been updated. That's how you'll score domain 1 and 4 during each of the 4 formal observations. There were no new updates to any of the templates that go in the Google site since fall of 2023. So for our new supervisors, all of this is going to look new when you see it. But if you're a veteran supervisor for Western and you did not supervise a student teacher in fall semester of 2023, then you need to review those templates again. Some of those changed in the fall semester. So again, domains 1 and 4, as I mentioned, this is the point of the sources of evidence Google site. We've explained to the students that they have to keep this updated so that in each of the 4 formal observations that you come observe, you'll look over their evidence that they've updated, and that's how they'll be scored on domains 1 and 4 during each formal observation. Now, domains 2 and 3 of the framework, those happen when you go watch them teach, because they're all about, domain 2 is all about classroom management, and domain 3 is all about instructional strategies. So how well they engage their students, what kind of questioning they use, all of those kinds of things. So those things are observable when you watch them teach. But domains 1 and 4, that's why we have the Google site. And that's why it's really important that the Google site sources of evidence is not a fluff piece. It's not something that student teachers just do to do. I've tried to explain to them that this is the evidence that we have that shows they are proficient and ready to be a certified teacher. One piece of the sources of evidence that probably changed the most in the fall of 2023. Again, if you're a brand new supervisor, you're going to look at all the different templates, because they are going to, so that you can kind of get used to those. But for our veteran supervisors who did not work with a student teacher in the fall of 2023, you need to look at the professional growth plan, because it has changed. We are doing a smaller version of a professional growth plan. We're wanting our students to have some consistency in how they do this, so that they learn the process of creating a goal, the process of self-assessing and deciding on their goal, and then what kind of activities they could choose to go towards a goal. A regular teacher would have a whole year to work on a professional growth plan. If they're being evaluated in a school system, sometimes even more than a year. The growth plan can stay the same each year, and they may revise it as needed until they finish that goal. But ours will be on a smaller scale, but we do want our student teachers learning to be very intentional about how they self-assess based on feedback from the mentor teacher, as well as based on feedback from their first formal observation. So it's really quality over quantity here. Here's kind of an overview of that professional growth plan. The first 3 or 4 weeks of the semester, they should be getting that mentor teacher's weekly feedback every week that they're putting in their sources of evidence site. They're going to have their first formal observation conducted by you that first 3 or 4 weeks of the semester. So they'll take the feedback from those two things and they'll self-assess. There is a self-assessment that we give them in the template. They'll create one goal and they'll have 2 activities. They'll plan 2 activities to do towards that goal. And the due date for all of that's going to be, just immediately after the first observation. So just, within a few days after that first observation, they should be ready to self-assess and have a goal ready. That could be something you all could talk about at the post-conference after that first observation. Then the next 4 or 5 weeks, they complete the 2 activities, they reflect on them. We give them the reflection template. If they follow those templates, it makes it really easy. You'll review that at the second observation. And, you can see the due date, so on. So if you look at this progression, you'll see that they at midterm, they kind of reflect again. And on the template, it'll say at midterm, write your reflection here. And you can see the due dates. And then during that first 3 or 4 weeks of the second 8-week session, they will then create a new goal and just repeat the cycle. Our student teachers, we'll talk a little bit more about scoring in just a few minutes, but I did want to bring up substitute teaching because some of our student teachers will be serving as and being paid as a substitute teacher during student teaching. If you have one of these student teachers, some of their sources of evidence might be changed somewhat, but for the most part, they have to continue all the parts of the sources of evidence unless they're a long-term sub, and that will be chosen on a case-by-case basis. You would still be observing them if they're a substitute teacher in a long-term position. You would be still looking at sources of evidence. There would be a few pieces that we would revise for those long-term subs. And we'll talk more about that with you. If you have a student teacher who is serving as a sub, you'll receive a whole outline of an agreement guidelines. But if they're just subbing on an intermittent basis, they still create the whole sources of evidence. They're not allowed to substitute during their solo weeks unless they're long-term, unless they're assigned to a long-term position, but they can't take a day in the middle of the solo week to serve as a substitute teacher. But there is information on the website about substitute teaching on our student teaching handbook site and on the resource page that we have outlined for you today with this recording. And again, we will send you more information if you have a student teacher that is serving as a long-term sub. The attendance policy for our students, they are given a calendar at the beginning of the semester. You can see their calendar. The calendars vary district by district depending on the district, but those are provided on the student teaching handbook site. And your student teacher will have put their calendar in their Google sources of evidence site. So there'll be a link to their calendar. And if they miss for any reason, illness, if they have to take a praxis exam, oftentimes those are only on weekdays, unfortunately. If they want to go interview for a job and take off school, if emergency happens at home or they have sick children, whatever, they can have up to 3 days of excused absences. We've built those into the calendar. So the calendar will still meet their minimum requirements, even if they miss those 3 days. Now, if they miss anything over 3 days, they have to mark it. They mark all their absences on the calendar. Anything that miss more than 3 days, they have to make up at the end of the semester, because there is a minimum number of days that they have to complete. So we do ask you just to, if you know that they're missing a lot, please let us know. They're supposed to notify you and the mentor teacher if they ever are going to be out. Student teachers go to every professional development, to every any day that our mentor teacher goes to school, our student teacher should be there. If there's an NTI or snow day that the mentor teacher has to use as an instructional day, then our student teacher participates with them, then they can count that as an instructional day as well. So we do have, the state has 70 minimum instructional days. Most will have a few more days than this on their calendar built in. We'll have the 3 excused absences already built in, but they may go 72 days or 73. That's okay. We want them to go the calendar we gave them. It varies by district, but most of them will be right at 70, even if they miss their 3 days. There are 4 minimum formal observations by you. So you would go 2 times to observe the first 8 weeks and 2 times the second 8 weeks. Occasionally, there may be a student teacher who is struggling, and we might ask you to do an extra observation, or you may even realize it would be helpful. But the minimum is 4 formal observations. So that means you probably have anywhere from 6 to 8 visits to the school, because you've got that introductory meeting where you meet with the mentor teacher and the student teacher together, just to make a plan for the semester and all of that. And then you have the 4 observation times that you go. Most people do a post-conference right after the observation. You know, that would be smart if you want to schedule your post-conference with them right after the observation. But if you can't, you could Zoom in with them, or do that separately. And then there's those final midterm and final grade meetings that you want to have with the mentor teacher and the student teacher at the end of both 8 weeks. So that's where we get that 6 to 8 minimum visits to the school. I would suggest that you go ahead and schedule at the very beginning of the semester, that you schedule with your mentor teacher and your student teacher. Go ahead and make a plan for, approximately this week we need to schedule our first observation. And then so many weeks later, we need to schedule our second observation, and then the third and the fourth. I think that's important to go ahead and get it kind of predetermined on a calendar. And if you need to adjust it for your schedule, or the mentor teacher or student teacher says, hey, we can't do it now that day, you can adjust it as needed. But I think I would not let them, I wouldn't just wait to do that, because I think sometimes the semester can get away from you, and especially from our student teachers if they don't have a preset plan. And the mentor teachers, I think, appreciate that. Again, I think I mentioned this. We want you to have an introductory meeting with the mentor teacher and student teacher to discuss expectations from the very beginning. That's really important. I would, when you have that meeting with them, please remind the mentor teacher about co-teaching. Our expectation, we've told our student teachers that they are to be co-teaching at all times. Now, the mentor teacher will guide the student teacher on what that looks like for them, especially at the beginning. But it would be our Western's expectation that both adults, the student teacher and the mentor teacher, are co-teaching at all times. Except during solo week, we want our mentor teachers to step back a little bit and let the student teacher take the lead completely. But it is, the students in that room really deserve the benefit of having 2 teachers all day. So if you can reiterate that for us, it's very helpful. Student teachers really, we went over this with them at the student teaching training, but I would really make sure you establish any expectations you have about deadlines or any of those things early on. Make sure that you talk about how you want to communicate with each other. If it's email, it has to be your WKU email account. That's really important on our end that we use the WKU email account, and we'll be using WKU email accounts to communicate with you from our office. But if you want to text or cell phone or whatever, you share that with them. But the biggest important reminder here is that they know, the student teacher knows that 48 hours before you're scheduled to go watch them teach, that they should send you their lesson plan for you to review. That 48 hours is important. We don't want them planning at the last minute, and we also don't want it. We want to value your time so that you can look over it before the observation and not minutes before or hours before. The same with their reflection, their analysis of the lesson. That's 48 hours after the observation. It should be sent to you. We don't want them waiting to do that either. You need that to finally score everything on that observation. And it's really important that they get used to that reflecting. And so we want to stick to the 48 hours. And then the last thing would be that they keep their Google site source of evidence updated. Every time you observe them, you should see some new evidence added to almost every area. There might be one record keeping, I think, is one of the areas that we wouldn't expect that there's always going to be something new for that, because it's probably going to be pretty static and the same. But most everything else, family communication and professional involvement log and all those things should have updates every time that you can look at to say, oh, they're working on this. All of that needs to be kept updated. I've mentioned the minimum for formal observations, 2 each 8 weeks. When you observe them using the Danielson Kentucky framework, developing oftentimes our students, this little clip art here is more for our student teachers than it is for you. I know that you understand that developing is very appropriate for our student teachers, our pre-teacher candidates. But our student teachers sometimes panic when they see the word developing. That's not a bad word. They're going to move into accomplished. Many of them will. But they should not be panicked if they are at developing. And you shouldn't worry about giving them that. They need to whatever they earn, they earn. That's the score they earn. The one thing I want to make sure that you remember is, when scoring domain 1 and 4, we told our student teachers domain 1 is all about lesson planning and, how well they reflect and how they analyze the data and all of that from their lesson. If you don't have that information on time, then you'd have to give them an ineffective on domain 1. If they're turning their lesson plan in an hour before you're observing, they're not being professional and meeting that deadline, then domain 1 would have to be ineffective. Domain 4, if they're not keeping their professional involvement log or their family communication log or any of those things updated, then we need to mark it ineffective. The reason we do that early is because that will nip it in the bud. They have to get in the habit of keeping up with all that. And it's hard. They have a lot. I know they do. But this is their capstone semester, and they have to be ready to meet those deadlines. And because when they go in their own classroom, unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of deadlines. We want to help them learn to do that. As you score, when you do those formal observations, the 4 formal observations, please make sure the student teachers get a copy of your notes at the post-conference. Or leave them something for them to review as they reflect on it. Be sure the scores or the notes are entered into Anthology shortly after that post-conference, because the student teachers need to be able to see it in Anthology. That's the formal record that we have, is in Anthology. our anthology program. Either way, we want our student teacher within a timely access, within 48 hours, or so, to have talking points and things that they can, from the post-conference, that they can reflect on. Please add comments in anthology when you do the formal observation and the midterm final evaluations. It's really important that you get those comments in there, especially if they're ineffective or if they're developing at a point where they need to grow. Everything, the official record is what we see in anthology. So if you've given them copious notes, we won't have copies of that. And we need evidence in our final official records. And really, student teachers can't grow without intentional, constructive, and positive feedback. We all know that. It takes a little more time, but we really, that's part of the responsibility as a supervisor. If the lesson plans for formal observations are not on time and they're not meeting your expectation, don't forget, domain 1 should be scored ineffective. I've said this many times throughout this recording. I'm sorry I'm being redundant, but that's one of our inconsistent areas that we're finding. If they're not updated in the sources of evidence for domain 4 under professionalism, again, ineffective. Let's bring it to their attention early, and then they should improve. So the anthology program, we have it linked on that resource page, the tutorial, the directions for how to get in it. We have it on our Student Teaching Handbook site. You're going to use this anthology program after each formal observation. That's where you'll put each formal observation scores. And then you'll also have a midterm or a final evaluation at the end of each 8 weeks. And so again, the tutorials are on there. Every student teacher that you supervise will have 8 documents total in anthology for you to complete. So there'll be 1 for each formal observation. So that's 4 formal observation documents. There'll be a midterm or a final evaluation at the end of the first 8 weeks, along with a disposition. And then again, at the end of the second 8 weeks, there'll be a final evaluation and a disposition form. So that's how you get the 8 documents. So if you have 2 student teachers you're supervising, you're going to have 16 documents in anthology. Now, don't panic. They're going to be, each one of the anthology documents are named. So, first formal observation, second formal observation, and it'll have the student teacher's name. You'll have a dashboard. Once you start using anthology, it'll be easier, but there will be a lot of documents in there you'll be doing. They'll all be in there. You'll just do them a few at a time, when it's time to do them. There's a few confusing issues sometimes in anthology, so I'm just going to bring up a few of them. Again, we have a tutorial on how to use this. I'm going to show you a few slides from the tutorial just in these little slides here, but for the most part, once you start using it, it's not real difficult. You never average the ratings from the observations to get a midterm or final grade. So we're not, if the very first formal observation, they weren't doing very well, they were ineffective in several areas. At the end of the first 8 weeks, if they've improved, that's the final evaluation for them. We want it to be not an average of scores. We want growth over time. So that's real important that we're not trying to average anything. Sometimes in anthology, there is a final score button you'll see. We want you to get in the habit of ignoring, don't hit that final score button. It's in the tutorial for when you first try to enter your data into anthology. We have a step-by-step tutorial for you. And one of the slides shows you this. So here it is. When you get to this slide in the tutorial, it'll say, do not click the blue save button. Now, if you do, it's okay. But if you do, it's going to give a percentage here. It's going to say to the student teacher, you made a 63% out of 100. Well, they didn't, because we're not scoring them that way. So if you'll ignore that final score save button, it won't give these kind of scores here. If they end up with scores like this, we just tell student teachers, ignore that. Your final grade is on another document, at the very end. So ignore these as you go along. Another confusing issue sometimes is that the disposition rating is separate from the midterm or the final evaluation. So remember, we have a scoring guide that we use where you look at what is the disposition rating on the student teacher and what is the Kentucky Framework overall rating. So when you look at those two to come up with the grade, you have to look at the scoring guide, but the disposition rating is not attached to the midterm or the final evaluation in anthology. I'm sorry, we wish we could. There's no way to do it. We've tried it, but the way that the program is set up, it's two separate documents. So you have to kind of look at the disposition criteria separately in anthology. You have to look at the framework, and then you have to look at the scoring guide. We apologize. We know that's some extra work on your part. You would look at the scoring guide that I showed you earlier. You would decide what the overall ratings in the framework were at the time of midterm or the time of final, and then you'll look at the disposition ratings. And in anthology, again, this will be in the tutorial of anthology. I just took this one or two slides out. This is the disposition rubric so that you'll see. And so the areas over here, teachable, passion for teaching, high expectations, and so on. There's minimal effectiveness, developing, so on. Well, over here at the side, when you click teachable, it gives you the descriptors for it. So you'll be able to see those, and you'll click which one they are. And then the final grade is given down here at the bottom. It's the last question on the evaluation, either the midterm or the final. So down here, after you've looked at the scoring guide with the mentor teacher and you've decided, we believe, the mentor teacher and you believe that this student teacher deserves an A over here based on the scoring guide, then you would mark A over here. You just click that in anthology, or B or C, so on. If there are ever red flags, if a mentor teacher tells you they are very concerned, they may not reach out to our office. They're probably going to reach out to you as the supervisor. Please contact us. If you're seeing after the first formal observation, you're thinking, oh my goodness, I'm really worried, please reach out to our office. If the student teacher's not keeping things updated, if they're not meeting deadlines, they're not keeping their sources of evidence site updated, contact us. We can intervene. Poor attendance, poor communication, or any other reason, please call us. We're here to help. We want to intervene early so that we can help our students be successful and finish successfully. The earlier we know about it, the better. And hopefully there's documentation along the way. Remember that. We can't 1 week before the end of the semester decide that there's a major problem and we don't have past documentation from the semester. We have to all throughout the semester be documenting if we really think that there's going to be an issue. Please wear your WKU supervisor name badge when you visit the school. The school will probably still give you some sort of school ID to wear during the day while you're there. But we do want you also to represent Western, and we will provide that for you. So please let our office know if you don't have one. There's several travel forms and different things. We've linked all of those on our website as well as the resource page today. Again, you can read over those different documents that have to be turned in, and you'll have reminders from our office as things are due. We want to thank you for serving as a university supervisor. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us if we can help you. Our university supervisors are a key role in helping our student teachers succeed in this final capstone semester. And we just appreciate you very much, and thank you and look forward to working with you.